Hi, welcome back to another episode of The Architecture of Health. I'm Deb Boyson, and this week my guest is Grace Fleming, a hand-in-hand certified instructor. I invited Grace because as my son went through a variety of challenges, I had no parenting skills. I was boundaryless. I would let him, I felt out of control, and I didn't realize what was missing until I took a class with Grace. It was about parenting. And yet, the most important part of what I learned was some basic principles of communication and how to have healthy boundaries in communication that have lasted me way beyond those years when my son was young. So thanks for joining me today, Grace.
Thank you for inviting me. Yay.
Okay, so just to give the audience a little background, what is hand in hand and how is it different than other approaches to, and we'll start with parenting.
Yeah, hand-in-hand parenting is an approach that was organized by a woman, Patty Wipfler, in the last 30 or 40 years. Although the concepts, of course, have been around for a long, long time. First and foremost, they value connecting between parents, connecting between parent and child. When I say between parents, I don't mean between the biological parents of a child, but parents getting the support they need from each other. So it's a fellows supporting each other. And connecting with children in this case is something like deep listening. Like you, Deborah, I learned a lot about boundaries when I went through my education with hand-in-hand parenting. And it's about healthy boundaries. Not like, okay, I said do this in 5 seconds or else kind of boundary. It's more like, I see. Well, if it's a safety issue, I'll take, I'll be responsible as the adult. I'll put a stop to this. But if it's other kinds of boundaries, it, we're there to help the child be able to calm down emotionally enough to have the child access their thinking brain so that they could make good choices. If a child is stronger than you, and we can't physically boundary, to be honest enough to say, I just cannot take care of this child at this moment. I need extra help. And it's a kind of humility too. So, unlike the parenting rules that I thought I knew when I thought I was so smart in my 20s, it has a lot of humility. It's not formulaic. It really is in brain science around the emotional part of the brain and the thinking part of the brain.
So how does my impression from doing one, maybe two class series, I think, my impression that was different was it didn't have this top-down dominance model, and that it was about making boundaried space to connect with the child. For example, I remember one of the concepts was special time. I remember, especially when I was young, babysitting, I would just let the kids, I was kind of their slave. I would just let them sort of run the show, and I was always trying to sort of catch up to them. And learning this idea of like, oh, you get to be in charge for, I'm setting a timer. You get to be in charge for 5 minutes. We'll do what you want. And that using time as a safe, making safety for myself and my own needs was something then I also learned in hand, this way of setting a timer and sharing with in a confidential way with another adult so that it was safe and each person knew that they would have their time and there wasn't this constant thinking about what am I going to say, what am I going to say. That making that space had to do with making a container that was really safe. That
Okay.
I didn't think that's what was parenting. I thought parenting was, oh, give him this consequence, give him that consequence. Even the positive discipline stuff, it was all about natural consequences, but it really, like you said, it sort of became this game, this power exchange of getting them to change their behavior versus making space to understand the disconnection in the first place.
Right. So I heard you say two things about boundaries. One is the top-down kind of a relationship, and the other one is a time limit. I'm going to step back a little bit and emphasize the importance of the connection part. I think the parenting approaches that I had been exposed to prior to hand-in-hand parenting, they all assume that we can somehow manipulate or control the child to the point where we get their get them emotionally controlled. So we can talk to them as reasonable children, have them apologize, and not repeat their mistakes again, kind of thing. And we had to know what the right answer was. If we're connecting with the child at an emotional level and know that they're in a fight, flight, freeze, fawn moment, then we can hold them. We can just say, I'm going to make sure you're safe. And just that helped the child know that we were there for them. We were connected with them, understood that they were in this really difficult place. We're putting a container to protect them from whatever they're afraid of. It could be imagined or real. So that connection always comes first. Any parenting issue, any human issue, perhaps, connection firmly and gently in place, then a lot more could happen. And we need to be patient enough to wait for the child to feel that safety, trust that we are there for them. And then it may seem magical, but according to brain science, it's not magical. It's a biological evolutionary thing. When the child feels safe, the victim feels safe, when the threatened feels safe again, then they can shake themselves loose from that fear and proceed in a more reasonable way. So sorry for backing up, but
Oh
the
no, I love
connection
it.
piece. All right, good, thank you. And we call that listening and hand-in-hand parent. That's why the seminal work that came out, the book is called Listen. It's just called Listen. That's the first part of the title. Listen, 5 simple tools to meet your everyday parenting challenges.
I hear what you're saying is first you can't really communicate and connect when the brain's in these excited states, and so the the holding space so that they can get back to a state of calm rather than I remember my parents were great in a lot of ways, but I remember getting accidentally kind of locked in my room and tantruming and throwing metal things at the door and splintering the door like that. Oh yeah, and then they were right outside. They didn't let me out. Like I still have this part of me that is like nobody's listening. Nobody's listening. Yeah.
Right, right. So that's an interesting case. Because the topic that I veered away from was boundaries. And you needed may have been for them to open up the door and give you a big hug. But what they, if they were honest, needed may have been that to keep the door locked because ideally, they could have opened the door and done that. but you may have been stronger and bigger than they were. You may have had a baseball bat and they felt threat. I don't know. Maybe you were completely safe and it was all their imagination, but they were incapable of coming in and offering you the big hug and sense of safety that you needed. So if they were hand-in-hand parenting parents and they were taking classes or gotten support, maybe they would have worked towards that so that when you were tantruming, the two of them, or maybe five of them, got parents and came and said, Deborah, we're here for you. I know you want to throw that, and we're going to make sure you don't hurt yourself, others, or your room. We're here for you. We're going to hold your hand.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
And what happened? Let's see, I was 3 or 4, and the door
Mm.
locked by accident. And as I started to beat it to say, help, help, and then it was going on, and I could hear them, and I was like, help, help, give me. And then finally I grabbed my little metal baby doll chair and I started to, but I hear what you're saying. This would apply to, like, imagine how scary it would be with a giant teenager. Like,
Yeah,
yeah, and you're
yeah,
right. The parents need to take care of themselves as well. And,
right,
and what I
right,
will say though is my whole family, we learned to stonewall, of just
right.
don't talk, just
So if
don't listen, don't talk.
right, so the connecting is the foundational concept, but in terms of the five tools that the book describes, the five tools of hand-in-hand parenting, concretely, the foundation is the listening partnership, which you spoke about, parents helping parents. And I forgot where I was going with that. Through that kind of work where we're equals, because we take equal amount of time to listen to each other, and you alluded to that too. The same minutes you will listen to me, I listen to you, and we exchange. Having this camaraderie, this support network, we come up with our own solutions. You're saying, oh, next time, get 5 people, we'll go in there and hug. I'll come up with my own solution that works for me. It might be the same, it might be different. But with that support, perhaps I'll become more sensitive about the signs that give before that tantrum starts. You know, maybe I'll be more careful about lock on your door. Maybe I'll remove the lock to a 3-year-old's room, something, but I make it safer for you, Deborah, to continue to express your feelings and who you are as an individual. So it's the opposite of Stonewall.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and I'd like to elaborate on the listening partnerships. One thing I remember learning was that the reason we needed that support network is we have this extra, we have this like extra energy, and we don't have space. A lot of the times with the parents, they might be working, they might also be parenting, maybe there's even other responsibilities on top. And when there's a feeling of no space, there's no room to listen to anyone else because you're full. So I got that. And it's similar in the world of health and detoxification. When we're full of anything, there's no space for the nourishing stuff. So we need to like, and yet it's not the same as venting at all. It was way safer because we were there with a peer. It's confidential. I have my time. They have their time. We're equals. And as I spoke, I would sometimes come in and think, oh, I'm having a great day. And then 5 minutes later, I'm bawling and like, oh my God, am I going to die? I didn't realize what was in me that had been unexpressed. I didn't, and hearing myself speak it and having someone, and I would never have arrived at that without the sense that someone was listening. And yet, as you just alluded to, they're not there to reshape, they're not there to govern, they're not there to control, nor are they in a good way. I almost call it libertarian or egalitarian therapy, where we come up with our own, once we hear ourselves, the space is made so that we come up with our own authentic directives about what we can do. Yeah, it's a great practice. And to anyone listening, I wanted to also mention that I tried this format in a less equal way, and it did not work. Where I was like, oh, I'm going to make space just to listen to you, and then it I didn't have my space to empty and reflect, and it didn't work nearly as well as one. You taught us governance. You taught us what we can and cannot do as a listening partnership. You taught us about confidentiality. You taught us about not cross-talking, interrupting, not even really reacting to the other person so much as being connected. And third, just this knowing that this person will work there. Oh my God, this is the best part. This person will work through their stuff. And one safety net that you gave me, then this body of work gave me, was that if someone's in a deep emotional place and their time is up, you offer them a question that puts them in the other part of their brain, like, Grace, how many pairs of shoes do you own? And then that would, using the neuroscience, that would get them into another part of their brain where it became a safe way to end the conversation. I know some people feel trapped when someone else is grieving, like, oh, this is going to go on forever. Like, stop crying. It's going to go on forever, versus having, again, this tool and this education so that it could be a really healthy practice. And as I mentioned, the listening partnerships I started back then during COVID, when everything was changing for me, I still have now. It's been years where we've been meeting once a month with one of my friends, and it was once a week with another friend. And it's a really beautiful practice. And those are, there's another word for it, right? Listening partnerships are also kind of known as co-counseling, or is it a different thing?
Historically, many of the concepts came from co-counsel. I think we're trying to pack in this short podcast. I want to get to the basics of why the listening partnership and perhaps co-counseling works, and it also jives with internal neuroscience or interpersonal or the brain science that backs up why this process works. Apparently, the thinking brain is the last part we can access. Let's go get some water. And then if I look for water and I can easily get it, the emotional part says, see, here's some clean water, and I drink it and I'm fine. But let's say I'm really thirsty, the survival part starts to go crazy. I get lots of energy go around. Flight.
Freeze?
Oh, or in flight. When freeze would be where I've given up. I'm dead. I'm just gonna die. And then there are other Fs where if somebody did have water and they're not giving it to me, I say, I'll give you anything. Sacrifice my most precious XYZ. And then we start to, But let's say that getting water is simple. We go to the to the kitchen, get some water. Then we can access our thinking brain. Oh, from now on, when we do podcasts, I'll have a glass of water to me. And so when I'm thirsty, I'll just drink some water. So the order is very, very specific. Something happens, our thoughts, our instincts go to survival mode, and then the emotion mode. And it's like a traffic jam. If we can't get through one place or another, we can't the thinking brain. So a child, let's say a child's playing nice by himself or themselves, and suddenly looks around, go, wait, nobody's around. I think I'm lonely. And it's a survival thing, right? In an evolutionary way, if a child is left alone, it could die. And even if the child is at a child care center surrounded by 100 kids, there could be that sense of loneliness, like nobody's listening to me. I could die. It's that profound. And and the emotional brain says, is anybody looking for me? Is anybody caring about me? Does anybody want to connect with me? And yes, there is that child caregiver. There is that friend over there saying, I want to play with you, or just looking at me and connecting with me, visually. And I go, ah, I'm okay. I'm okay. And then I can play cooperatively, say, with that child that looked at me, or I flag down the work and say, my mommy is at work now. But let's say that doesn't happen. The stonewalling, the sense of isolation, even if there are 100 children around, then I might start exhibiting behavioral problems because I get to the thinking brain where I just say, Deborah, I have a truck. You want to play with me? Or, teacher, I'm really sad. My mommy's at work. Or whatever it is, to be able to get to the problem solving part. So, um, in a hand parenting listening partnership, um, we respect the other enough and trust that they can get to their own solutions if we're there for them, just like that child that looks at me, makes contact, and says, I'm available to play with you, or the child care worker that looks at me and smiles at me and says, hey, are you okay? Does that make sense? Now I come up with my own solutions. I need to that my mommy went to work and I really miss her. Or with the child, yeah, I really need a playmate. And then with our adult selves, it's like I'm just so fed up with my tax accountant. And I'm being mean to my children. I'm so irritated about it. And friend doesn't say, oh, I know a tax accountant that works really well. No, that, Deborah, if you're listening, my partner they just go, oh, go, yeah. Oh, you know what? It's because I haven't paid him yet, or or whatever it is. I'm like, oh, I do know another tax accountant, or oh, I need to get X, Y, and Z documents ready, and then my tax accountant can actually help me, or whatever the solution is. I'll come up with it myself. And Deborah, you don't have to waste your energy going like, well, I'll try to get the phone number of the tax accountant I know, or Grace, did you actually tax accountant all the documents they asked for? No, I'm doing the work myself, and you're showing me respect by connecting with me at a deeper level where I'm just like, yeah. Does that make sense? The
Oh,
parallel
yeah.
between the
Yeah.
child?
I love the
Okay.
explanation. It reminds me of how good it felt to learn it in the class. Yeah. And the class that I took, it was like, I think it was a 6-week program, and pretty small group, very intimate, 2 facilitators, really beautifully, beautifully run. Are you
So good.
how did you even get in this realm of education and understanding?
Well, as I said earlier, I wish I had known about it when my child was very small. But in a very roundabout way, I became friends with somebody who was going through the hand-in-hand parenting instructor training program. And at first I'm like, my kid's already a high school student. I don't need this. But the more I learned, the more I became intrigued. And I knew I needed it. Not just at first, I'm like, okay, maybe I could be a better parent. But in the end, and now, like Deborah, you said, it was for me. It was for reparenting myself. So I am using it all the time now as a 64-year-old in my life. I work at San Quentin with people who are incarcerated, and I'm using it all the time without telling them so because, it's all human connection and it's so respectful.
So San Quentin, the prisoners, wow. Yeah. And that's what I've learned, like going through the very intense experiences, I needed it more than I ever had before. And I can't imagine anything more intense than incarceration, really.
Mm.
So that's how you got into it. And I got in, I took your class when my son was maybe 9 or 8 or 9 or 10. I can't remember. I wished I learned it sooner, but it always applies. In fact, as I'm listening now, I realize I've fallen back into problem solver as the boss mom of my 17-year-old because I've gotten much more into realizing I don't have that much time left while we're together this much to impart all my wisdom as I'm like, hey, I'm almost
Mm.
57, driving this way, making these kind of friends. And and yet we do it in a pretty connected way where we first start by making space for each person to just each person reports on what's going on. But you're reminding me I could up my artfulness and respectfulness and get out of this exhausting codependent savior complex, you know?
Mhm, mhm. Well, we are not equals to our teenage children, right? We are still there. We're not, it's, we're still their
The
parent.
parent.
Yeah, and no matter how old they are, keep offering. And I think the key word may offering, um, and at the same time showing respect. Son is 32,
32. Ah,
right? And no matter where he lives on the globe, we stay connected with weekly.
right. So what are some steps people can take just to learn more about either hand in hand or listening partnerships? Is like I heard you mention the book Listen. That's
Yes,
specifically written about parenting, but it applies to all age groups, right?
right. Well, I know that it took me a long time to grasp all these concepts. I really needed the concepts repeated to me from a variety of ways with different vocabulary. So if I were just starting, I probably would read that book because I can't understand it because it's so foreign to me to have that much respect. Yeah. Yeah. So I would, if I were just starting out, I think the only way I got in was because I knew this parenting instructor or somebody who was learning. And because of her patience, I was willing to give it a try. And I'll take couple of workshops of hers because she offered it to me for free. I don't know if I would have paid for it because, I was so right? Like, oh, I got this.
Well,
But
that's a
the
big question.
book,
I want you to finish, but also later maybe you could say, like, how do we know we don't got this? I told you I would go in and think, oh, everything's fantastic until
Mm,
someone
mm,
listened and there was a space made.
yeah. So there are free seminars online if you go to Hand in Hand Parenting website, and I would take the free ones.
Well, how do we know we don't got it? I mean, and it
Oh,
sounds like
right.
one of the things you're saying is you could read the book or go to the free webinar, and I didn't know I didn't have it until I was in the class. So there's no risk if you're a parent, just up your game and take the class or read the book. But
Right.
anything else on that?
We're humans. We're always going to be going like, I have this. No, I don't actually know what I'm doing. And that's just honesty and humility.
Honesty again. Yeah.
Yeah. And we don't got it. We're just humans with our foibles. We know we're not perfect, and imperfection helps us to keep learning.
And one way to recharacterize this is I'm sure there are a lot of different parenting classes offered. And that's one reason I had resisted is I didn't want to take a parenting class where it was like, well, make them cry it out. And okay, this is a funny story. I was in Ecuador. Went there during COVID briefly, and the teacher was describing how in the United States the parents let their babies cry it out, and these 30 Ecuadorians went, oh! Their culture is so connected to the babies, and I'm sure the work culture is different as well, where women aren't out full time. I just knew because my son had all these challenges with allergies and this and that, and I knew that our breastfeeding and everything longer than expected. I already had to sort of try really hard to resist a more militant narrative around what was right or wrong for us to do. And so I resisted. I was like, no, because in fact, he had a floppy larynx. If he cried too much, he stopped breathing. So I was like, I'm not following your orders. No, he's not crying it out. And so then and then I found the positive discipline stuff that seemed to make some sense. But and that's one of the themes of my show is like kind of frugality. There's a lot of effort one can put into trying hard to do the right thing or be healthy or eat right or do therapy, and some of them just don't work. And the hard thing is we often don't have data or points of comparison to tell what's working and what's not working. So is there anything you just wanted to say about all the things people are trying that relatively expend more energy and may not get as lasting of results?
Okay, I think you hit on the point. We're looking for results and depends on what that result is. So, I come from where we were obedient because the punishments were bad enough that we looked so unhappy. Like school pictures were like, we got good grades. We kept our fighting to a minimum, but we had no relationships with each other, the siblings. And of course, we didn't trust our parents. So they got the results they wanted, which is good grades and good behavior. So when we have results like, I want you to stop fighting, or I want you to eat the spinach, I want you to this and that, that's that's kind of parenting that you were
The
about. Like you
controlling,
will
yeah.
sleep through the night. And I did the same thing with my poor 4.5-month-old or something. I let him cry it out. And it's like, oh, by day 3, he sleep right through. But, right now I imagine this child who has given up on me, who won't come to his aid, even though he cried so desperately, or he's so exhausted from crying. And so yes, he is sleeping through the night. But what did I do to him? So um, I forgot I think how do we know which parenting approaches is the right one? I'm gonna go back to the honesty and humility again. It's like if in those few moments when I could access my own feelings, and I feel like, wait, there's something doesn't feel right. If I could be just honest, and then we look. And most people I know who came to hand in hand parenting, they tried so many parenting approaches, and they tried so many dietary approaches, and they come with their heads down, going, I've run out of options, so I'm going to try this weird approach. I'm going to find out about this. And hand-in-hand parenting does not advice about nutrition and stuff, but these are parents who are trying everything.
Everything.
Yeah, whether it's nutrition or behavior stuff or how to play with their children that look really unorthodox. They're trying everything and they're going like, this feels right. Yeah, the lonely child in me feels about this, I feel connected and safe. Or the angry child within me is like, oh, no wonder I'm so pissed. This is what I wanted. So um, I hope people really look around and find the one that feels right to them, and not because it's popular or some movie star.
Right. And I love that you're reflecting back. How do we even pick what is a result worth having? Yeah. Mm.
I think hand-in-hand parenting was if you're connected with your child and you wanted the result of, oh, my child will go to college and will graduate and will get a good job, da, 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 then just connecting seems so boring. I mean, you probably know plenty of people who went to top-notch colleges and got good jobs who are so unhappy, right? Unhappy.
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, yeah. Anyway, I don't want to get too philosophical, but yeah, we all get to decide what was what is most valuable in life.
I also just want to touch upon one more time the idea of the listening partnerships in the same realm of we have a lot of choices for what we call therapeutic, right? And for
Mm-hmm,
me,
mm-hmm.
anything, well, even in the physical practices, I started to think, well, if I'm moving my body healthfully and therapeutically, then my mind will follow. I've learned that I had this blind faith in all sorts of different methods that I still kind of I got off course and didn't know till an injury or something happened that I was missing some kind of reflectivity or connection or honesty or something, or maybe it was a compulsion driving me to do that thing. There was something else maybe I wasn't addressing. And when I learned the container making of the listening partnerships from you, it was just so profound as someone who was used to just being like, at one point in my life, I was the quiet one and was just always listening and helping and listening and helping, and then building that resentment inside of like, who cares about me, you know? And what I learned was that in my experience, when I compared it to a couple of times I tried talk therapy, I would get in this spinning loop of story, and sometimes my brain was just kept chattering and chattering in circles, and sometimes I felt even worse after a talk therapy session, a Hakomi therapy session where the facilitator had me reflect back inside, like, oh,
Yeah.
what do you feel? Oh, my neck. Anything come to mind? And then I start to voice something, and they're just asking questions that are letting me own my experience and letting me experience my body and what it's trying to tell me. This but the listening partnership, but about all both of these were very expensive. Going to
Yeah.
any kind of therapist is expensive.
Yeah.
So the egalitarian libertarian part of me that loves to be have financial sovereignty, setting up these listening partnerships with people to get through troubling times felt really good to me because, uh, well, because it created more safety financially as well. Although I'm sure there's also some risk. I'm lucky that I picked people I knew pretty well, had integrity. But and well, what's funny too, I remember there were some guidelines about what don't to do or who not to have a listening partnership with. Uh, can you remind me?
Yeah, don't start an intimate relationship with your listening partner. Like you might be attracted to them and go, hey, let's go out to dinner and so who not to have, I don't remember that part, but the important part is like you said, the equality. And as soon as you're having a relationship that's besides the listening partner, then there's going to be a hierarchy because one has more money than the other, or more time than the other, or the child is more successful than the other. Um, and we can't help but compare. So if we can keep our listening partners, and that then it helps. And even then, stories come out, and I know I start comparing myself. And then about therapy, I'm going to make a comment on when a therapist is just asking questions, they're already in a role
Ah,
of authority, right? They're like, oh, this is a good thread to continue on. Maybe she needs to talk more about neck hurts or her relationship with her mother. So in a listening partnership is a lot more open. Is There is judgment though in that the listening has the option of helping. See, there's again that inequality, questioning their assumptions. So, if I were saying like, I know I can't stand up to these men, they're larger and they have more education than me. Deborah, you can, as a listener, I'll counter my beliefs by saying, would you like a moment and say, I can stand up to men who are bigger and have more education. And I'll say, no, I can't do that. It's like, oh, just for fun. You want to just say, maybe, okay, maybe I can sometimes stand up a tiny bit to men bigger and have more education. Maybe. The more I laugh about it, or I just kind of squirm, the more emotional offloading I can do. And just entertaining that idea could help. So it's not always completely equal. It's like anything else in life. We try it. Ooh, if it tastes like bleh. If it doesn't feel right, we don't do it.
one thing uh, we've talked about several times is power imbalance and hierarchy, and that's one reason you're saying we can keep this listening partner as a kind of clean role. Other than there's a little bit of that side nudging as a possibility, but it's not this uh, authority relationship at all. It's a
Yeah,
space
yeah.
making safety. Yeah.
And I've had my listeners say, like, don't don't say anything in the next 10 minutes. I just need to talk. Just need you to listen. I don't want to hear you say anything. And that's what they need. And we have that sovereignty. We have choice to say that to a listening partner. Oh, I could say I've never said it. Okay, what's the countering statement here? How can I counter this stupid belief I have? I can, like help me out here.
Yeah, asking for what you need,
Mhm.
asking them to play a supporting role in your sharing.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to share about this before we wrap it up, Grace? I mean, of course, we want people to know how to reach you if they want to know more about the fabulous
Mhm.
work you do.
Thank you.
Uh, and that, and Hand in Hand is Hand in Hand Parenting website,
Mhm.
and the book Listen. It's probably on
Mhm.
Amazon. Anything
Yeah.
else you want to share?
Well, I that's plenty, right? And to get anybody started. Yeah. Take the free uh, uh, free seminars. I think they're on Instagram, Facebook, and probably some other social media too. So whatever works for you. And yeah, you can find me on the NN Parenting website.
And if you're not a parent, but you want this something you could do to start playing in this realm, is even still with my son, sometimes we just set a timer and I just let him talk for 5 minutes and then I talk for 5 minutes, just as a tool to get us out of that. Even though I am the authority, I've learned finally how to be both in charge and to respect and connect. I'm getting closer, at least. But
Nice.
as a tool, a shared amount of time in a safe that's safe, and you're not going to go spill the beans to someone else. That's one tool that's the simplest I can think of
Yeah.
if I'm feeling disconnected.
Yeah. Well, okay, I will mention one thing as an extension to that. So, kids who've grown up with their parents doing listening partnerships and all the tools, as teenagers, they do listening partners with each other.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, and plenty of people who are not parents take the parenting classes because they're an expecting grandma or they want to be a better auntie or uncle or, grandma, grandpa, I should have said, or they're teachers where they interact with children. Or, or I guess you could just be an interested neighbor and, you love your neighbor's children.
What a great point, because it never would have occurred to me that how many people could benefit even from just focusing on the parenting realm too. Wow.
Hmm. Hmm.
All right, Grace. So your contact info I'll put in the show notes,
Okay.
and again, the name of the practice is Hand in Hand. It's a parenting practice. The other One of the other tools that's in that toolkit are listening partnerships, is what we talked about, and the book Listen is a life changing book. All right, Grace, you changed my life for the better forever. Your work, that class has stuck with me. So you're so profoundly. Thanks.
I'm so happy. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.